Hi, Alan T. Neal, talking to you still more about philosophical things, writerly perspectives, and the like. Um, I just did that long piece about rationality versus irrationality. And from my perspective, again, my writerly perspective, my authorial perspective, one thing we've absolutely run into in this age, and that I think it harms us in many respects, is lazy brain syndrome. You know, speaking about rationality versus irrationality, we've gotten into a situation thanks to the ease of communication by which, what this represents, our phones, our tablets, and so forth. The technology has made it easier than ever to communicate to people and to go off half-cocked. And that's part of the problem, is that it's easy to have an opinion about something. You could say whatever you want about any different thing and just lob it out there. But the amount of mental legwork you have to do with regard to having an informed opinion about something versus just a hot take, as people like to say, it's very easy for trolls and folks with those hot takes and people with nefarious motivations for communicating lies and deceptions. It's easier than ever for people to do that. It's easier than ever because of that. It's easier like that. It can just drown out good information, good thoughts, rational thoughts versus irrational. It's a chorus of irrationality, which, like a flood, like a red tide, just washes in. Because having a rational and informed opinion about something, it's work. It's work. You don't get that quick hit satisfaction of telling somebody off or just going after somebody like that. And that's a problem for us as a civilization, as humanity. Misinformation and disinformation, which I mentioned at the very end of the other post. There's a whole cottage industry in that, a finance industry of misinforming people and deceiving them, using that ease of communication, the viral communication technology allows for. And it's shocking to me because even in professional journalism, there are situations where news departments get defunded. The 24/7 news cycle, streaming and things like that overwhelm the old time emphasis on trying to deliver good information, trying to get to the truth of something. There are situations where companies and government officials and the like, especially companies though, will put together a packaged chunk of misinformation and just deliver that to a news source, which they can then look at that and say, okay, what can we make use of with this? Instead of, because they may not have the budget, they may not have the inclination to go forth and send reporters to find out what's really going on. And it's frustrating because you'll see a situation where something's going on and the news frames it because they're pretending to be objective, where they'll say so-and-so says XYZ, and then they'll be like, when the other person says ABC. And now, of course, one could look at that in a very sterilized environment and say, well, they're just putting this out there and letting the audience decide. But there comes a time when the media folk can't keep their hands clean by taking both sides or stepping back from it. Sometimes, if it's advocacy journalism, there have to be stances that you can look at that and engage with it. Like if just hypothetically here, if our government denies due process to people and just disappears them, sends them off to a gulag somewhere, one could report that and say these people were deported. But the deportation implies a procedure in place, right? It implies that those people were sent to court, and it was determined through those proceedings that person was, for whatever reason, not fit to remain in the United States. However, if somebody is just is whisked away, and they don't get that due process, there's a problem, right? It's deceptive. And the media reporting on it particular ways becomes part of the problem because it then normalizes that behavior. That's people love to talk about the slippery slope. This is that slippery slope of irrationality versus rationality, and why as citizens, as human beings, we need to make sure that we are following the evidentiary paths where they lead, the evidentiary trails, especially people who are in roles like in journalism and whatnot. They have an obligation to inform the public and not misinform the public, or disinform the public, or actively lie to the public, or mislead the public, it's work. And I worry, from my perspective, having thought about this for quite a while, and I think I spoke about this elsewhere, is the idea that we are in this era of what I call the phone it in. Some crows have some opinions on that. Phone it in society, where people are just going through the motions of democracy, going through the motions of law and order, going through the motions of truth and justice. And when that problem with that is when that gets stress tested, it reveals that the whole thing is like a Potemkin village. It just there's just nothing behind that facade. And frankly, from a perspective, and this is again bringing a writerly perspective into it, that's terrifying to me. That idea of a going through the motions society is terrifying. It should be terrifying to you too, because it's scary, because suddenly all the things that you thought were true turned out to be just fictions. And we're swimming in this world of fiction. And again, as I've said in posts earlier, that idea of writers as creators of fiction, we make a point of understanding what is fictional and what is non-fictional, what is true and real. And we are uniquely suited to make those assessments. And it's very unsettling when you see untruths masquerading as conventional wisdom or truths. It's terrifying. And I don't know if we have it in us to make that journey to justice through truth, because suddenly people say, well, who's truth? Fake news. The liars attack the truth. They want it to be, and truth, unfortunately, it's at the heart of any moral decision. And if you gut truth and cast cynical broadsides at even the idea of trying to seek the truth, oh, that's just your opinion, you're just you go after that gives a huge win. It gives latitude to the willful deceivers, the untrue, the false folk, the irrational, to run the table. So it's something to think about. And this is why, from my perspective, any creative act, any creator, any artist, any writer, we owe it to ourselves. Part of what we do, strangely, in our creations, is we do try to get out slivers of the truth, facets of the truth that we know as human beings. And that's why we're so essential, and why perhaps unappreciated in the larger society. So think about that.